Hey guys, how's it going? It is Kerry with another Awaken Chaos Hero video, and in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the top AoE nukers here in Awaken Chaos. AoE nukers are great for a lot of content in this game, mainly going to be campaigns, Void Tower, and Arena. Specifically on the offensive side of Arena, that's going to be some of your best tools to be able to beat these really tough teams the further on you get in this game. So getting really good versions of these is going to make a big difference in your success. So a lot of this is going to come down to luck on if you pull these heroes, but it's good to know when you got a good one so you can make sure to build them out and use them accordingly. So I'm going to start with more accessible ones first, then I'm going to go to the ones that are going to be gacha only. Unfortunately, there's really no elite heroes that are good as a arena nuker. That's an elite hero is Zac. As you'll start to notice, he's significantly worse than pretty much everyone else on this list, because if you look at his base stats here, he has B tier attack. That's going to make a massive difference in how his attack stat scales going forward with the better percentage gear you get. And then his modifiers here, you look at this is his big nuke. It's only 150% damage to all enemies. It does scale with the fewer enemies that are remaining, so it gets stronger. But just keep that in mind going forward, that this is the baseline. This is considered a good elite nuker. Every account gets this guy. So if you don't have some of these other heroes on this list, you can at least use him for now, help you clear a campaign, and hopefully you get lucky down the road with a better one. Well, and before we begin, I do want to talk about, when it comes to these nukers, elements matter a ton in this game, because the elemental affinity, when you have type advantage, you get 50% extra damage boost. So in this game, switching characters based on your enemies to take advantage of the affinity boost is a really big deal. So having as many of these as you possibly can is great, because you're going to want to be able to take this in. So if you're going against blue, you really want to make sure you have a wood character to be able to do that extra 50% damage. Same applies if you're going against green. You really want to take a fire unit and stuff like that. So eventually you're going to want to have a wide roster, because that affinity advantage is way too good to ignore. Okay, so first hero is going to be Evra. And luckily she's one of the characters you can pull in the Ricky summons, but let's break down why she's so good. So her ultimate here deals anywhere from 150% to 200% damage to all enemies and grants attack up to this character for 3 turns. But since it hits all enemies, her passive here, +1 rage per valid hit on an enemy, max 4 rage, converts all rage into a bonus attack with the artillery support upon reaching max rage. So when she ults, she's going to convert this and go again, and then grants attack up to this character. And so it's a bonus ability, so she does even more damage. The only unfortunate part of her kit here is going to be this. It's a range between 150% and 200%, but it's already starting with more damage than Zachary does, for example. And is giving her attack up, so she's going to be able to do more damage later on. But for the most part, you're going to pair these nukers with a person that's giving attack up buffs with either Windrax or with Brand. This is something that is a nice bonus, but for the most part, you're already going to have attack up anyway. Then she has a good A2 here, deals 100% damage to an enemy and removes a positive effect from the target. Nice utility there, even though later on, if you face people with high resistance, a lot of your attackers are not going to also be able to get focus. You're going to be so focused on getting attack percentage, crit damage, crit rate, that bonuses like this on a nuker, unless it's set unresistible, are going to be something that are nice, but you're not going to really get to take advantage of, or are not going to be reliable, especially against people that are tough to take down. If affected by attack up, then launches a bonus attack. So this is another example of getting a bonus attack. 100% modifier is okay, but with the extra bonus attack with the gunfire, even better. And then lastly, has an auto attack here, 80%, a little lower than what it could be. Most times damage dealers have like 100% here, but when you combine all the rest of it with a 30% chance to apply bleeding for 2 turns, if affected by attack up, then launches a bonus attack. So here's another example where she can launch a bonus attack. So it essentially makes up for that lower than normal modifier there. And then with S tier attack, this is the best you can get. So easily one of the best nukers, especially if you're facing a lot of blue characters. And currently in this meta at the time of this recording, there's a lot of really tanky blue characters you're going to be facing in arena offense. So I think she's one of the best nukers you can get in the game currently, and she's guaranteed if you chose to pick her in the beginning. Also, currently at the time of recording here, there is a magic pass for her. So if you're willing to spend money, you can get her guaranteed as well right now. So definitely worth it if you're willing to spend money. One of the best deals in the game. And then next, out of the accessible heroes, we're going to talk about Valeria. So another really good hero, starting with the ultimate here, consumes 20% of this character's current health and deals 180% damage to all enemies. A little bit more reliable than Evra's, where instead of being 150 to 200%, we got 180 guaranteed. Grants a bonus turn upon defeat of an enemy. I like this. It's a bonus turn, not the gunfire, which is nice. if you want to be able to do something else instead of just extra AoE damage every time. Deals 100% damage to all enemies and recovers health equal to 35% of the damage. Another nice AoE here, instead of having 100% damage to one person, removes a debuff. I would rather have this, 100% damage to all enemies and recovers health equal to the 35% of the damage dealt. So gonna kill you up unless you're really low. Lastly, 100% damage to all enemies, 50% chance to apply defense down, just like what I was saying with Evra. Debuffs with these characters are not going to be too reliable unless people have absolutely zero resistance. Her passive reduces all ability cooldowns by 1 turn upon the death of an enemy. A nice combination with her kit, how she's getting bonus turns here with the kill of an enemy. And then you have this. So a lot of times it's going to be, they have maybe 1 squishy or 2 squishy characters and then some tanky heroes. So it's actually realistic to be able to proc this off and be able to use this ability here. And then if you have her ascended, grants attack up 1 turn and reduces all ability cooldowns but 1 turn upon the death of the enemy. So grants the attack up instead of just only reducing the cooldown. So 4 turn cooldown, which is actually pretty reasonable, especially if you proc the bonus turn and you get the extra ability cooldown here. So it's going to be 2 turns off of it immediately. Really good character here, especially for a fire nuker, a massive upgrade over Zachary's Sierra, because eventually you'll get her. And when you do all the bounties and you get to level 100 on the Void Tower, so you could eventually get her. All you got to do is challenge her. I haven't challenged her yet, but you'll be able to unlock her. That's going to be, quite a ways away because you got to beat level 80 of the bounties. So finishing the bounties is level 80 if you guys are not aware, finishing Hard Tower. And that's pretty difficult content. You're going to, maybe have pulled her by then. Sierra is a great character because of this passive here. When the enemy's health is under 50%, deal 100% damage to all enemies, can only be triggered once every 2 rounds. This triggers quite often, especially if you're going through content where there's multiple waves. It's nice to, it has a automatic follow-up because it's not actually using a turn for this to go through. So if you have a good AoE nuker to go ahead of her, and then the dark spread happens, it's going to cause a ton of damage. Then you have a targeted nuke here where it expends all Vengeful Spirit and deals 200% damage to an enemy. This attack deals 20% more bonus damage per Vengeful Spirit expended. And how you get Vengeful Spirit is upon the defeat of an enemy. So if this procs and finishes someone up, then it's going to boost her single target nuke. It's just really good. She has S tier attacks, so she hits like an absolute truck. Really one of the best characters in the game in my opinion, especially for this job of doing damage. And then lastly, her auto attack is good too because 100% damage to an enemy and applies increased damage taken. So this is very solid and kind of underrated. This is mainly for specific bosses and stuff. If you're looking to do a little extra damage, like on a single target situation, like on Ashe, for example, I actually like putting a little focus into her to make sure this actually hits. Pretty solid hero. But for the most part, you wouldn't be surprised if people just build her all damage, don't care about the focus, and just have this, her A3 and her passive just hit like an absolute truck. So really good nuker. Okay, now I want to talk about Hydressa. She's another accessible hero, but the reason why I don't think she's nearly as good as the other heroes is just her modifiers are way too low. So you have 100% damage to all enemies, which just doesn't cut it when you're trying to hit hard. She does have S tier attack. Also, unfortunately, she has C tier speed, which is a bummer. It makes a big difference in making sure she could actually go faster than people. All these other people with B tier speed are always going to have a big leg up on her in base stats. She doesn't really make up for it with the lack of damage, and the lack of speed is just not good enough for a nuker like this. And then the pure RNG of her passive here is a bummer. I would rather have a consistent 100% and it do less damage than this 50-50 thing that they got going on here. It's just not a good passive. I feel like she should have been some kind of, she shouldn't have been focused on damage. I feel like she should be tankier. If they're going to make her slow and then have this speed down thing going on for her, I really don't like that she's a damage dealer. She's a support hero with damage dealer stats. And that kind of, you really don't want to mix it up like that. I'd rather have a character purely focused on damage, not a character that's all damage based with a good passive on the side, because then you can't really do damage. If you want to make sure the speed down lands, then you got to put some focus onto her, which is going to be tough if you're trying to focus on all this damage, unless you have just god tier gear. But even if you did, this 100% modifier is just not going to do enough damage to ever really matter. One thing that's nice about her, though, is she does have 2 AoEs. So she has an AoE on her A2 and her AoE on her A3 with very short cooldowns, a 2-turn cooldown and a 3-turn cooldown. If you're doing lots of waves of enemies, you can rely on her to AoE pretty consistently. That's why I don't like Hydressa nearly as much as I like the other two. A character that's in her same class as a blue, if you're looking for a blue nuker, I think a character that's way better, but requires setup is Nathalia. If you started on launch, every account got this character. She does 200% damage on her nuke here. The setup required, though, is that she needs positive effects because naturally this only affects one person. This only hits one person, but for every positive effect this character has, their ability affects one extra enemy. If they have more than 4 positive effects, it affects all enemies. So you can make this an AoE. Then she has one of the most busted Ascension effects in the game, where for every positive effect this character has, affect one extra enemy and increase damage by 10%. If they have more than 4 positive effects, it affects all enemies. It increases damage by 40%. So you got a 40% damage buff, which is crazy. Then you do 200% damage. You have S tier attack. You are squishy. You're faster than Hydressa. It's just a no-brainer. So you want to take, you could put her in a guard set. You could take her with like Brand or William. Those are popular combinations. Just make sure she gets a buff on her. Then she's going to apply this passive here where it applies attack up and immune. So then that's 2 buffs plus the other buff on her. And then that's going to be enough to make sure she nukes the entire wave. So easily the best AoE nuker for the blue element is going to be Nathalia. Now let's talk about some of the harder to get characters. The big one, I think this is probably the best overall nuker in the game at the moment, especially if you're not dealing with that many waves of enemies, is going to be Euron here. Ever since he got reworked, I think he's absurd. So you got his passive where it grants an attack, it grants attacks an elemental advantage bonus. It can be triggered once per round. So this is one of the big things that light characters were missing, is that they would never have that elemental advantage against other normal elements. If he doesn't get hit first before in that round, he's always going to have that 50% damage boost. So then he has this ult here where it deals 160% damage to all enemies and applies defense set for 2 turns, which is, okay. Grants a shield for 2 turns, which strength that increases based on this character's attack, so he protects himself a little bit, but the main part of it is going to be 160% damage. So he could guarantee that 50% damage boost, doesn't matter who he goes against. That alone, absolutely insane. Then he has one of the best modifiers on the A2. Single target removes 1 negative effect, which is pretty clutch, especially in arena. Deals 180% damage, which is very high. One of the highest modifiers on a non-ultimate in the game. And then steals a positive effect. So he does both. Getting the steal, that's going to be a resistance check, so it doesn't always happen. But the damage alone, crazy. So then, you throw a 50% damage increase on 180% modifier on a single target. So he's not only a good single target nuker, he's a good AoE nuker, light typing. He's very rare, so tough to get. Then on top of that, 100% damage modifier, 30% chance to stun. Very good utility if you can land it. But for the most part, just a really solid AoE nuker that you could rely on and is consistently going to do a ton of damage regardless of what element the enemy has. Now I kind of wanted to talk about some fringe cases here. I don't know where to put Goobag. This you could consider him single target. You could say consider him AoE. He is a good nuker. He does a ton of damage, but he does it in a weird way. So he's A tier attack, S tier speed though, but he has this passive here where +1 bonus turn per round per 150 speed, +10 speed upon casting an ability, max 100 bonus speed. Then he has his ult here where it deals a total of 300% damage to a random selection of enemies. So that's kind of where I'm getting the AoE nuker. Massive modifier, the biggest modifier we've seen by far. Damage scales with this character speed. So it's a big modifier spread around between potentially, all 4 heroes that you're facing against. But then the damage scales up the speed, then his bonus turns get more speed, so he's able to go multiple times. So you have a 300% spread around with the increased damage. Then you could do the A2 here, you could get the extra poison. You could do his A1 where it does 50% damage, which looks very low, but this attack has a 30% chance to ignore 50% of the target's defense and grants him speed, which is going to make his ult better, which is going to make him faster to potentially give him more bonus turns. Then if you have him ascended, which is crazy because it's a 5 ascend on a legendary, it's +1 bonus turn per 100 speed. So you can make him go multiple times. He's just going to be going so much. Even though he doesn't hit as hard as other characters, he has very low defense, but you could just get him to constantly go, keep scaling with speed. Even though his cooldowns look very long, the fact that he's going so often is pretty crazy. And then later, if you start to kill some of the enemies, he's going to be doing some of the best possible damage as a single target nuke with his ultimate here, because it's all going to get funneled on that one character. So it's, not only is it a 300% damage nuke to one person, but it's higher than 300% damage because it scales up the character speed. I don't know those modifiers. I haven't tested it, but he seems to hit pretty hard. The only bummer part, A tier attack, but I really like him. I think he's pretty cool. I want to get him fully ascended. And I think it'd be a lot of fun to just see all the bonus turns come pouring in. Okay, so this is going to lead me to my last kind of pseudo AoE damage dealer in the game. Is going to be Imogen here. Kind of like Goobeg, where the damage doesn't all kind of come out. It's going to be all through passives is going to proc this AoE damage. Passive here applies 2 Moonlight at the beginning of the round, grants this character an unremovable Moonlight upon receiving a defense pierce up, max 20 stacks. Moonlight expends Moonlight, grants joint attack alongside an ally of an attack. So every time an ally goes, she's going to help if she has Moonlight. So applies 2 Moonlight in the beginning of the round. So when she goes immediately, she's going to be able to expend a Moonlight and then grants a joint attack. She has this passive here, Moonblade Shot. When an ally attacks, joint attack that deals initial damage of 30%, which decreases with each bounce. This consumes 1 stack of Moonlight. When an ally lands a critical strike, launches a joint attack that deals initial damage of 60%, which decreases with each bounce. This consumes 2 stacks of Moonlight. So if you're first person that goes after her in crits, and like all damage dealers would, it's going to consume both those stacks, and then it's going to do 60% bounce to everyone, which adds up. It's one of those things that, you know, as long as you're going to keep getting this Moonlight, just those little percentages going through really start to add up because it's free damage. It doesn't take a turn there to be able to use it. Her ultimate applies 2 Moonlight to this character and removes 1 positive effect from all enemies. That's one of the best positive effect removals in this game. Even though you're wanting her to do damage, it's going to be tough to get focus, but being able to remove that many positive effects is pretty great. Deals 150% damage to targets. Each successful removal applies +2 Moonlight. So she might actually be worth investing the focus on to guarantee that you're removing positive effects here, because getting all that Moonlight is going to allow her to constantly join in and do that 60% damage that hits everyone. And eventually that's going to start to add up. Because, like, for example, Sierra hits really hard. She's an S tier attacker that does 100% damage on her AoE. Imagine, 60% going through multiple times. Yeah, eventually it's going to get up to that point. Then lastly, her A1 here deals 100% damage to an enemy and grants 1 Moonlight plus 1 Moonlight and 30% damage per critical strike. Very good ability there. Got to build her with crit. Got to make sure that goes through. And as much attack and focus as you possibly could get with your gear. You could even build her with like stun sets and get the support of just her constantly attacking. She has an AoE there, so you could stun and remove buffs. Like, there's a lot of potential here, but from a nuking perspective, she hits like an absolute truck. And you could really pair her well with other characters. Super good character there, even though, yes, she is a dark legendary, just like you're on light legendary, very rare, but those are the best in the game currently at the moment. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think on this list. Is there any other AoE nukers that I left out that you guys think are really great? And with that, guys, I am out. Peace.